Hey guys, remember to like the video and hit subscribe.
One thing that really frustrates me, and it was one of the reasons why I enjoyed watching this debate, and I'm in the process of reading through both of the judges' decisions. One thing that's really frustrating to me in kind of this current like alternative media environment is, and I think I've seen you say this on your Twitter account, there's this phrase like "do your own research" or "I want somebody who does their own research," and nobody does. And there is sometimes this, you've got like different layers of people. You have like I don't want to like call out names. I don't want to like rope you into hating people, you know. But so I view people like Joe Rogan or whatever. They'll have these people on and they'll say, "Well, this is good because we can have good long form conversations." And the conversations are just garbage. They don't actually get into anything. And then you have this second tier of people, and these are the ones that I hate the most. They have this like aesthetic of research or rationality, and what they do is they try to develop these like sophisticated heuristics or these systems or ways of looking at the world, but then they always miss what is like just this fundamental factual investigation of whatever the fuck they're talking about. Like there are so many shows where I'll hear it said over and over again, just these random claims like, you know, why do they give all three shots together for the MMR? Like, I don't know, have you looked it up ever? Where people just ask these like really basic questions, like have you done any factual analysis at all? And then like put them into your big conceptualized model of how to view the world. And I kind of felt similarly for the root claim stuff. It was crazy how many times in that third debate, at the end of like an 18 and a half hour debate, Sarah's like, oh, well, I'll have to look that up. And it's like, dog, you have 30 minutes left on this $100,000 debate. What do you mean you'll have to look it up? Why did you look it up beforehand? What do you mean? And I feel like that's lacking. The people's like inability or unwillingness to like actually just like do a little bit of reading, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm happy to talk about Joe Rogan or other podcasters if that's part of the show, but I think he's really gone downhill over the last few years. I watched a lot of those people before the pandemic. I was a fan of Joe Rogan, Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, and like every one of those guys has turned into conspiracy theorist or right-wing grifter. I don't know if that's just like we've gotten more polarized during the pandemic or those are just bad choices they've made, but like the whole IDW concept has gone downhill. And I think Rogan is like, I mean, he's more of a conspiracy theorist than ever. And it's also like he's very accessible. You know, you go on Spotify or you go on YouTube and his videos are everywhere. So if you want to learn about a new thing, you should really go and like find who's the expert on this thing and watch their video, not just watch Joe Rogan's opinion on it because he can't be an expert in everything.
Sure.
And so it's like, I think of it kind of like as fast food equivalent for information. You know, like you can find a McDonald's anywhere, but it's not healthy for you to eat McDonald's every day.
I actually think it's worse than that. It's like going to McDonald's and getting the McDonald's salad every day with a ton of ranch on it and pretending that you're eating health food. Because I think that's like triggered me so much over the recent kind of alternative media environment. It's not so much that it's like garbage. It's that they wear this like aesthetic of rationality. When you talk about the IDW guys, they all do this like dispassionate, hyper rational and logical. And they just say like the most outlandish shit. I remember even arguing with Jordan Peterson, I think like 2 years ago, like he's still bringing up like, haven't you seen the VAERS database? And I was like, do you even know what the VAERS database is for? And like there's like the same talking points that are dispelled with like 2 seconds of reading. Yeah, and it's so frustrating because like if you were to describe like everything that you say to describe your like research process and everything else, I don't know if you noticed or not, but they're all red flags, right? It's like I like looking at how you describe like, oh, I do my own research. I don't have an educated background in this. I wanted to see what was going on. I was like, oh, this guy's gonna be full of shit, like dipshit. I say the same thing about myself, like the way that I describe it, because like that aesthetic of like just being willing to do a bunch of reading and form your own opinion has been hijacked so much by all of the like counter narrative dudes that are now mainstream everywhere.
I mean, yeah, people should listen to scientists and not me technically because I'm not a domain expert. But I mean, I did put in a ton of research for the debate, and that's one of the good things about the financial incentives. I'm going to try as hard as possible. And I guess what I'm saying is also endorsed by scientists now. I'm friends with a number of them I've met after the debate, and a lot of them will retweet the things I say. So,
or when I say you throw up red flags, what I mean is that like generally the people who say those things are the people that don't do any research or homework. They're the people that like they wear those things as like an aesthetic, but they don't actually follow through on any of it. They just like do the jacking off, the just asking questions over and over and over again, and they like read about nothing about the topic.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably red flags there just in terms of they start out saying you can't trust the authorities. You got to trust this YouTube video. You probably don't have to pay too much attention to the YouTube video.
Of all the stuff that I guess has come up, what are other topics that you've like similarly, I guess, feel like you've done this level of investigation into besides the COVID stuff?
I wrote a long series on green energy a couple of years ago. I did a good one on the lead crime hypothesis that's gotten posted around. My most popular blog post I ever wrote was I compared the IQ of Trump supporters and
Oh, jeez.
uh, Democrats, and that's kind of the problem with the incentives. Like any tribal thing like that gets a lot of clicks
Hmm.
because people can just use as ammunition in their arguments against each other. But when you write about something more scientific, then you, it's more fun for me to learn about something that's not so polarized, but
Sure.
it won't get as much attention because people don't care as much about science as they do about hating the
Who it ends
other.
up supporting, yeah.
Yeah. That was
Did
a fun one though, because like IQ discourse is something you're not supposed to talk about on the left, and then just using the exact same arguments to say like, oh, actually Republicans are genetically inferior, and they got a bunch of liberals to retweet that. That was a lot of fun.
Sure. Have you ever talked to Richard Hanania?
I know who he is. I've never talked to him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because he triggers the fuck out of everybody consistently. Although now he's, I think, kind of in the anti-Trump camp. But
Yeah, he actually was early in doubting lab leak. He realized it was bullshit back in 2020, and I think
mhm.
I don't know, he's good at like not falling into groupthink.
One of the things that really disappointed me, and I'm curious if you have looked at anything, you feel like there's anything similar to this, is when coming into the lab leak thing. So a long time ago, I didn't believe in the lab leak at all because all the people pushing it were conspiracy theorists, and it was like created a bioweapon and blah blah blah. But then as the years went on, and like more organizations or intelligence, apparatuses have come out and been like, oh, we kind of think it was a lab leak. My opinion kind of drifted. It was like, maybe 50-50. Maybe I even said 60-40. Maybe it came from a lab. We don't know. And then truly, it was really just like the first third of your the first one third of like the first one third, I guess, your presentation in the opening. And after that, I was like, holy shit. This is like, I'm so unbelievably wrong. I'm cringing at any time I ever gave any credence to this whatsoever. I thought this was way closer. And I remember, I think coming out of the first third, I was like, I feel like the biggest point you have to fight back on now is you can't have all the early cases being at the wet market, because at that point, it just seems like the argument is almost unwinnable. Do you think that there are any other, and then obviously coming out of it, I'm like, Jesus, I don't know. Yeah, there's no shot that I think a reasonable person could believe this without some kind of non-scientific information, like if you actually had evidence of agents taking a virus to the wet market, you would immediately shift, Do you think are there any other like theories where you feel like the public is kind of 50-50 on it, and you're like, I think the evidence is actually way stronger on this side than most people realize?
I mean, there's conspiracy theories like that, like the JFK assassination. I think the public is like 60% on there's a organized conspiracy,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't just Oswald. It was maybe like he's a
Second
patsy for
triggering.
the CIA, or some collection of mutually inconsistent theories probably. And the actual evidence would probably be really strongly for Oswald acted alone.
Sure.
And that's I think that might actually be where lab leak ends up. 20 years from now, it'll still be like very much scientifically settled
Mm-hmm.
that it's natural, but there's never that dispositive evidence, and the public just wants to believe. They want to blame Fauci. They want an explanation for what happened, and that's a lot easier to blame some person you don't like than to blame some animal, blame some faceless wildlife trader.
Yeah, that thing that you just said about it in the future is actually one of the things that bothers me the most. Is I don't like the idea of there being an idea that there's so much evidence against it and it's so clear cut, but I can see in like 20 or 30 years it will be a legitimately contested thing, and I can see parents telling their kids, like, oh, the 2020 election was stolen, like we know that for sure, and it definitely leaked from a lab, like everybody knew this and they covered it up, and that idea of it just kind of somehow, I guess, like congealing inside of our collective minds and then going forward forever, it kind of bothers me. Yeah.
Yeah, they're already putting it into like high school curricula. Same with like the stolen 2020 election. There are states that are putting that in the official school
Mm-hmm.
curriculum. So that'll get propagated for a long time. And the JFK thing, actually, I think people had a reason to want to blame the CIA because the CIA was kind of right-wing coded back at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, JFK was the left-wing hero. And so it couldn't just be like, here's our, famous politician that died for no reason. So you have to imagine this conspiracy where like there's a reason why he died, that it's a big political thing. And I think we saw that last year with the Butler where people on both sides, like on the left, it's a staged,
Mm-hmm.
and Trump cut his own ear or something. And on the right, it's like this guy, he's working for BlackRock or the government or whatever. And you you don't want to just believe that this kid's just some crazy incel that wants to kill. Because we still haven't figured out what the kid's politics were, but like he Googled like appearances for both Biden and Trump, and it's kind of just like he wanted to shoot somebody to be famous. It's not even clear it was.
Yeah, I was
he
surprised
hated
at reading that
Trump.
like he like bought the ladder and like the same day. It was like an hour before the thing. It seemed a little bit kind of unhinged. It wasn't like some
Yeah,
super carefully plotted out event. Yeah.
but you don't want to like just believe it's this random shit and some kid beat the security. So it has to have some meaning for your politics. So you
hmm
lean towards some theory that like makes it meaningful for you.
I'm curious, like interpersonally, um, you bring up this idea of hard to account for stuff. I wish I could remember the name of this guy, and I should because I've watched this one segment of a JFK assassination video. He's done like I've watched this on stream like 6 times because I wish people could understand this point. Is sometimes you'll get like 10 pieces of evidence, and like 4 of these pieces of evidence will be like dispositive. It's like this, it's 100% this. But then you'll get like a couple things that are kind of difficult to account for. But these couple of things will like ruin people's minds, right? Like I think for the Oswald thing, he shot pretty quick. Like they were pretty quick shots, but it wasn't like impossible. But I think they were like pretty quick. But like the fact that they were pretty quick is enough for people to be like, well, and then to doubt like dispositive stuff where it's like, how do you explain this? Is there any way interpersonally that you've ever like have you ever argued this lab leak stuff with a friend or talked to people where you can shift them out of that type of mind state? Don't laugh. You don't have an answer to this. People
Yeah,
ask me
no,
this all the time, and like my whole family is like crazy MAGA conspiracy and everything. I'm like, I have no yeah, I just do this shit on the internet, but I don't know how to actually do anything in real life. Yeah.
Yeah, I can convince lots. I have convinced lots of people that are on the fence
Okay.
about this issue. Because like, it's like where I was or where you were, where it's like, oh, it's 50-50. I don't know. There's so much conflicting information. And you don't like really have a biased or motivated reason to want to believe it's a lab leak. You're just like, this is complicated. I can't tell. And
hmm
so people like that, even Scott Alexander was like that. He was like 50-50 or maybe like 60-40 leaning zoonosis before we started talking to him before he wrote that blog post. And then he
Sure.
looked at the evidence and said, oh, wow, this is a lot stronger. The all the epidemiology for cleavage sites really not that convincing. Um, so people like that I can get through to. People who want to believe lab leak because it's like part of their identity are pretty impossible. Like I have a cousin that I talk to about every conspiracy theory, and I've haven't convinced him on this or really any other conspiracy theory.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. If somebody's
and it's
genuinely on
like,
the
yeah,
fence, yeah. Or so good.
yeah, like oh, I mean, like every conspiracy theorist is a lab leaker, except for like the handful that don't believe viruses exist or whatever. But like every lab leaker is not a conspiracy theorist.
hmm
There's lots of completely normal, completely sane people that just are confused on this or haven't looked into it that closely.
Did this get like more attention or less attention than you thought it would on the internet when you did the debate?
It still probably hasn't gotten that much attention overall. I mean, it's like 50,000 views on the whole YouTube sequence now. I think the biggest spike was when Scott wrote his article about it.
hmm
So it's been very influential in certain circles, like the rationalist community that reads Scott's blog and smart people like that. I don't think it's filtered out into a wider audience, and I guess I never really thought it would.
Sure.
It's kind of like I could clean up my own like information neighborhood. The places I talk online, I could maybe convince them, but I never thought I'd like convince Fox News viewers or millions of people.
Did you ever get any like noteworthy or semi-noteworthy people that wanted to challenge you on it after or after the debate went live?
Like want to do a new debate?
Yeah, like any, maybe not necessarily like a Weinstein or a Dr. Malone type, but like any of these, like maybe a tier below, any kind of like well-known, like anybody in Yuri's circle, Doctor.
No.
Nobody. Oh,
I've challenged some of them actually. A few people have. Everyone wants to argue with me online, but then if they go for long enough, I'll eventually say, okay, let's get judges and put the money behind this, and then they always disappear.
hmm
Which is, I mean, not everyone has that kind of money or that time, obviously, but I've extended that challenge to a few people, and they've always backed down. And I
yeah.
think a few of them, like, I think somebody like a Ridley or Chan probably know that they wouldn't win this kind of debate. Like their evidence just doesn't. It sounds great in like 20-minute format with a couple bullet points, but it doesn't actually hold up in a debate. So
hmm
it's hard to know who's like a true believer and who's lying, who's a grifter or whatever, because there's a mix. Like Sar obviously believes this completely,
hmm
and he thinks his Bayesian reasoning works all the time,
Sure.
and he's not lying about any of this. But there's probably some people that are.
If you look at
There's
like if you look at like mainstream like shows or larger conversations, I say mainstream, but like if you were to have like a conversation from normal people, one of the things that I find really difficult about some types of conspiracies, especially when you talk about like grifters versus real believers, is sometimes like if somebody says a statement like this virus looks manufactured, it binds perfectly to human cells, and there's this thing called the fear and cleavage site that was artificially inserted. Like that's a statement that you can offer, and there are a lot of true aspects to that. But I feel like that's a statement that you can say in like 10 seconds, and I feel like it would take you like 45 minutes. Like the average person probably doesn't know what a nucleotide is, right? And you have to to talk about like out of frame versus in frame insertion, or what does it fear it even do, or like it just seems like so much legwork to get through. How do you, I guess, have you talk about like talking to people personally? For people that are on the fence, do you have to run through all this legwork, or like what are the most compelling pieces of evidence that you show them? I guess specifically and then more broadly for conversations like this.
The good thing is I've built a bunch of videos about this and Twitter threads and blog posts, so I can at least link explanations rather than just repeating it every time. But yeah, that's a lot of work. And like if somebody challenged me to an hour-long debate, we each got half an hour, I would probably just avoid that because I don't think you can unpack all the subject material in that much time.
Sure.
And that's what's so hard about this compared to other conspiracy theories, like a 9/11 conspiracy theory. It's pretty obvious right away that there weren't like explosives in the buildings, or people can intuitively understand something like that, or even like vaccine debates. It's kind of easy to tell who's crazy and who's not.
Sure.
But understanding virology well enough to know what a fear and cleavage site is, which ones have been added before, why a scientist would choose this one or that one, is so much work. And there's so many hours of lab leak theories and objections that you have to overcome. Like this wasn't 18 hours because I wanted it to be 18 hours. It was that long because there's that many different versions of the lab leak theory that you gotta work through to take the whole thing down. So if you end up debating this in half hour, like good luck with that.
Well, I feel like just going off of everything, like I said before, I feel like the strongest thing that I would harp on would probably just be the origin of the cases. Like the fact that there were so many early ones that started around the wet market. I feel like it's almost inescapable. There's that, and then that's tied into another thing that conservatives say all the time, where they'll be like, "Oh, the lab was right next to the wet market
on the doorstep." But or they say you were on like Piers Morgan last week, and he
said a mile.
Yeah, and it's.
And I didn't. But the thing, if you watch that episode, obviously I wasn't ready to go into all the lab leak there because that was not what that show was about. But I offered to fight the guy on it. But obviously these people never accept a debate. Like they have to be ambushed with it. But but even saying like 1 mile away, like we're Americans. Like if you go to New York City, like Central Park is like 1.5 miles away from the Empire State Building. Like what do you mean? It's like right next to it. Like it's such a stupid statement. But it's not even a mile, right? I think it's like a 12.5 mile journey or something. And I feel like just
like Manhattan to Queens or something like that. It wouldn't even be in the same borough.
I feel like that's like the most compelling like pro wet market thing. Like how do you possibly account for the spread otherwise? And then there's one thing that you did. I don't know if you did. I think you might have done this in part 1 of the third part, but I thought that this was extremely compelling. Is you flipped and you said if a single one of these pieces of evidence were in favor of the lab leak, it would be completely over, right? Like if all the cases originated from around the lab, that would be it, right? If you had positive tests of samples from the lab, that would be it. If your first 4 of 5 cases came from the lab, that would be it. Like you only need like one of these. And I think even you said, and I would probably say, oh yeah, I'm actually probably way more in favor of the lab side. But the fact that you have all of these things that just continue to point towards the wet market and nobody's priors update or whatever, nobody changes their mind even a little bit more in that direction. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, so people are going to come back with, oh, well, the data is fake. China, it's biased, ascertainment bias, or they're just hiding the earlier cases. And then, you need to be ready for that.
That was one thing I see when I'm debating people. I'm curious if you have any of these like things you pick up on. Is sometimes people will do things where I look at it. The biggest thing that I get when I'm arguing with somebody and they don't realize what they're arguing, they don't have enough like depth into the facts. So sometimes they'll bring up a point that is actually insane and they don't realize how insane it was. I thought it was crazy that you guys, it was in the final part of the debate where Sar brought up, it might have come up like one time briefly early on. Is it Connor, the guy, the white 25? And I was like,
Yeah.
wait, this is coming. I don't even remember this. This would probably be your single most important piece of evidence potentially. If this guy was like infected so much earlier, was a traveler, like was told, like how can you just like offhandedly kind of bring that up and not really explore it with any more curiosity? That's a really important case.
I think, yeah. So I debunked that in the debate, and then Sarr's response was basically, it doesn't matter if Connor himself is correct, as long as you have one case before the market, then you've debunked the market, and that means the market origin theory is fragile. Like it's always at risk of you finding one case that'll disprove it.
Yeah.
And in his case, he thinks it's not fragile; it's robust because it's this Bayesian thing, and
Yeah.
a lot of it is just his case is not like not as concrete, and that's why it's not as fragile. Like if you said, I think the lab leak started on November 15th, then all I have to do is find a case from November 10th that's outside the lab, and I can break that. So it's his argument's not like actually robust. It's just that it's not well specified.
Yeah.
It's the lab leak happened at some month at some lab via some mechanism. But it was Wuhan and it was some lab.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that was a little frustrating, although maybe because of the nature of the debate, is it feels like you kind of had to lay out a fairly specific, an incredibly specific zoonotic transfer, right? Like you have to justify why there were 2 spillover events in this particular part of the market. You have to talk about the mythical mahjong table origination theory, where I guess all of these poor Chinese people are being shoved into these infection rooms, and why that wasn't true because of the graph or whatever. You have to point out all these very specific things. By the end of that debate, even from Yuri, who seemed a lot more well-versed in the material, I'm not sure what is the lab leak theory? Like, is there one start to finish consistent lab leak theory that tries to account for everything? Because it feels like you're always jumping between like 6 different ones.
No, they're obviously not. And they throw in details. There's the September database, and then there's the November 3 sick workers, and then there's the October like hospitals and cell phone records, and those are all mutually inconsistent. I think you were starting to pick up on all of that by the end of the debate. Like you looked at the parking lot, the satellite photos of the hospital parking lots.
Oh God,
and
yeah.
And it's like they're comparing last year versus this year and different weeks from each year. And
I would never bring this up in a debate because it's too much mathy stuff, but I feel like it's incredibly compelling that I never even considered. I hate that I consider this. Our growth rates. When people say things like, oh no, I think the first case, it probably happened back in like maybe late August or like early October. It's like, and what? And then I think even Starr argued, it was probably cryptic transmission for 2 months. And then the perfect super spreading areas are the wet markets, and it can't super spread in any other place. And it's like, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I cut you off.
And if those hospitals were actually overloaded in October, then that means there's a huge number of cases in Wuhan, and there should be cases around the world. And everything needs to fit a timeline. And so that's like this argument that the case data is fake. That's worth thinking about, but the data we have fits this like growth rate where it starts at the market and then grows to be as big as we know the Wuhan outbreak is in January. And the math works out perfectly based on like the growth rate in Wuhan and the growth rate in other cities that we've measured. You start with 1 person in late November and you get exactly the right number of people when Wuhan locks down.
Yeah.
And the other way you can prove this is you can look at genetic diversity. This is the like time to most recent common ancestor calculation. So when it starts, the virus has no mutations. Like every copy of the virus is the same. And then it starts randomly mutating. And you can tell like from if it has this much diversity, this is when it started. You can backtrack there. And that also gives you the same date. Like the most recent common ancestor is early December, which is right when the market started. And so China could even fake that if they wanted to. Like if they faked the cases, they also had to fake the genomes.
Yeah.
Which is the same answer. Then there's also genomes from around the world. And if you run this math on like the diversity, the genomes around the world also point to it started in late November, early December. And it's the same math as if you do it from the genomes in the market. So now China has to fake every genome in the world, not just every genome in China. So that's getting impossible at that point.
Yeah, and it's funny because what you're talking about there would actually be a really good place to apply some sort of like probabilistic inferencing, right? Is like, what are the chances if we see a thing that's spread in this way over and over and over again, empirically, not theoretically or hypothetically, like we actually have measured it, like wouldn't it be more likely to do the exact same thing in these different environments or in the Wuhan market environment? It's very annoying that there's like two levels to one. People will say something like, oh, they faked some data, and one, people won't realize the level of investigation you can do, right? Where it's like, sure, you can fake some data, but then like you said, like you were sequencing genomes from so many of these viruses. This is a very, very hard. You can't just like, flub like an English essay and hide, like some guy's name in a paper. This would be a lot of work to fake this, and it would require a lot of it would be a lot of work from a lot of different people collaborating who've never leaked it and they've never made a mistake and all these other things. And you didn't even focus.
You'd have to start early. Also, you can't just go back and fake it, because they're giving out data through December.
Yeah.
So at what point did they know about the lab leak and when did they start faking it?
Yeah, and you brought this up and you didn't lean much into this, but I thought it was a good point. It's like not only were they faking it, but they were doing it while going out to dinners and taking pictures with all the other researchers, and nobody was like letting anybody in on this. But one thing that's like very frustrating, and I find that when I see people do this, that I really start to question the motives, is they'll have this like theory, okay, and then they'll have like they'll have a conspiracy, and they'll have a reason to back it. Not all conspiracies are false, but they'll be like, oh, China definitely wants to cover this up, but they won't even consider for a microsecond. And I could be wrong, but my opinion is, just based on how China wants to present itself to the world, is trying to grow, middle class, be industrialized. I feel like China has just as much of a reason to hide it coming from a wet market, but that's not even remotely considered. Because I feel like to some extent, that's a very humiliating event, that if you have people eating like disgusting animals from a wet market and that is causing these worldwide pandemics, like I feel like they would have just as much incentive to cover that up, but instead they fake all this data to make it look like that's actually what happened. Yeah, I don't know. It seems so dumb.
Yeah, people don't understand the politics there. Like the story is, oh, they're making up this market outbreak to hide the lab leak, but in reality, the Chinese government doesn't say it's the market. Their theory is that it either came from outside of China, maybe on frozen food, or it came from a U.S. lab, something like that. So every time you bring up the market outbreak, they say, oh, that's not true. It didn't start there. So like, why would they fake the data to point to the market, but then also not even agree with that? Why would they go on to say, oh yeah, this, and also why wouldn't they fake the data to be really good if they wanted to do that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, because they cleaned everything. Why wouldn't they just say, oh look, we have the original genome? Why the fuck would we be using car models and all this shit? I barely understand.
We found both lineages,
like they decided to fake a market event that has only 2 spillovers, and they're hoping that everybody just happens to piece this together through, and then the whole like the secret virus thing, but then they publish like the RATG, they publish that after the outbreak and everything, and it's just like, or like why would they even publish anything relating to any of these? It's so hard to explain. That's why I was asking, like, is there one lab leak theory that tries to account for everything? Because it seems like there haven't been. Yeah,
there are people who have their own lab leak theory, but there are lots of different people and there's lots of different theories. And every time the data actually comes out for the market theory, China is usually unhappy about that. Like there was this raccoon dog DNA that came out in 2023, and it came out almost by accident. And like Western scientists analyzed it right away, and China took it down after we discovered that there's like raccoon dogs and civets in it. And they tried to cancel the, I think it's GIS-AID. It's this database for genomes. They tried to cancel the accounts of the Western scientists who looked at the data and said that they'd done something wrong by looking at the data from the market. So like, if they're trying to fake data to point at a raccoon dog, why would they be angry when that data comes out?
In the
WHO report, they even denied that there's animals at the market. They said there's nothing illegal, no wild animals, look somewhere else.
Because I think when they went and they did the first sampling, I think they killed them all, right? Or at least removed them?
We don't know. Either the vendors took out their own animals because they knew a few days in advance that something was up. And then, I think the authority killed all the animals on December 31st. They definitely didn't test any live animals. They tested like a couple of frozen animals from the wrong species, and then they tested some stray cats.
I like the one point, again, you didn't lean into any of these that much, but I still appreciate it. The fact that they'd removed that character from the signs in the wet market showing that they had the live animals, I thought was very funny.
I just saved that for the debate because that was just fun to ambush. Sorry with that one. I figured you never would have noticed that.
Yeah. There are also just like a couple of like really interesting facts, like the fact that on I think it was on December 31st, I saw this as I was going through Eric's write-up. I didn't know this. And on December 31st, they'd already said that there were like 27 patients, and they thought there was like some wet market connection. Yeah, and this was before like all of the lab leak and all these other huge conspiracies, started and everything. So one thing that Starr kept saying in the last debate that drove me crazy, I don't understand this. You kept saying that because when people get sick at hospitals, I guess my guess is they keep some samples, I guess, to retroactively test if they need to. That's what it sounds like from your debate. To go back and look at stuff, but he kept saying that like there's no way they could have tested retroactively because they'd be trying to find this case in the middle of 80,000 flu cases or whatever. And I don't understand that talking about. He kept bringing it up. It's like, I mean, you would just test it. It's not like it would be like you would test it, and if you get a PCR match or whatever, then that would be it. I didn't understand that talking point. That kept coming up over and over again. But
I mean, they did test samples. They tested 40,000 samples from blood banks, people that donated before the pandemic.
yeah,
And none of them had COVID in those samples. And they tested like saved flu samples, like 1,000 of those. And there's just nothing from, before December.
yeah,
So yeah, so I don't know what SAR's idea was there.
yeah. When you were approaching the debate for this, had you already like made slides up for like other debates you'd had with people or anything, or did you start this whole project like from basically nothing in terms of like having a formal presentation set up?
I mean, we started negotiating in like February, and we didn't finally do the debate until like 7 months later. So I was making slides for most of that time just as I went along.